So I've got notes, and I'm going to use them. So I want to say it's so wonderful to see. It's wonderful to see a lot of you here, to see so many people. We need to meet in person. You know, there is something about all of us being in the room and generating energy together that is really important. What Kim was trying to say about the national conference is that it's magic there. I swear when I went this last time, it was the closest thing I can say is it was like being on cocaine for 3 days straight and never coming down. Like it was, I was exhausted afterwards, I will say that, but there was just so much love in the air that, you know, you just start talking to the person next to you, you don't know who they are, but it's safe. And so I want to encourage all of you guys to come. I did put in a proposal also, for the one in DC, and it's about, I called it coming out 3 times, because when I was 28, I came out as a lesbian, which I was at the time. I've kind of switched, it's like train tracks, and they were that way and now they're back the other way. But anyway, came out as a lesbian. It was a very difficult thing to do. And coming out as an alcoholic in a wine-loving family where wine is the good life, the sweet life, and saying actually it's killing me, and not saying it's killing my father, which everybody knew it was also very difficult. But by far the most difficult coming out experience I have had is coming out as a woo-woo. It is scary. It is more counterculture than being gay. It is more counterculture than being an alcoholic. It is counterculture. Because out there, the dominant culture says materialist science is the end of the story. And anybody who says it's not, who says there's more, is deluded, right? Or stupid, or trying to get attention, or just scared of the fact that you die and that's it. Like, there are so many skeptics, and that's kind of what's dominating. But I honestly feel that we are on the brink of a revolution. I honestly feel that more and more people are saying religion is not it, but there is an energy, and it is real. So I want to talk a little bit about the ad that I sent out, because it probably seemed weird, and I was going to mark this up with little stickums and I forgot. So usually I start with my NDE, but I'm going to start with me as a full-on woo-woo, okay? So this picture is one that was taken at a particular point, and this was taken a few seconds later, and I've got it off of Facebook. And the orb that had spoken to me is right there, and in the next one I'll pass it around. It's much fainter, but it is moving away because he told me what he had to tell me, and I acted on it. So here's what was happening. Have you ever heard that corny statement, footprints in the sand? Like, God, why were there only one set? Well, because I was carrying you. You know that one? Well, God was carrying me at that point in my life. And when I connect, I always cry, and I'm sorry about that, but it's just what happens. So I had known something weird was going on for a long time, and I had been fighting to push it down and just say, no, nothing's weird. It's just, I must have dreamed it, I must have something. I've been trying for years. And then I had this doozy of a mind reading experience, which I will tell you if I have time. And it was just like such a crazy mind reading experience that I Googled IANDS. But I didn't go here because I was afraid everybody would be a weirdo. And then eventually I broke up with my no good boyfriend, and I had nothing to do on Saturdays, so I came here. My first meeting here was September 2012. I had been working on an addiction memoir that had my weird things in it, and it is for sale back there, but it's really for alcoholics. It's not for people who don't want to hear an alcoholic story. So I'll just say that, but coming here gave me the nerve to publish that. So I published it, and my family came down on me like a 20-pound rat trap on my neck. It just came down on me ruthlessly. I got cruel emails, and I got 1-star reviews. They kept buying Kindles because it was only an ebook, and they kept buying Kindles so they could post more 1-star reviews and say how horrible it was. And I got a certified letter threatening me legally if I didn't retract the book. No one called me. My brother, sister, no one. All of this was done through text. So I was really struggling, and it's hard to hold this mic up, man. It makes me shake.
You could put it on the mic stand and
Nah, I don't want to. I mean, if you could set it up while I keep talking, that'd be good.
yeah.
So I started going to Al-Anon to deal with my sick family, and I made friends there who helped me out. But I was leaving an Al-Anon meeting in December of 2012, which is just a month before that picture. And as I turned out of the driveway, I was on top of Queen Anne Hill, and I felt something mushy with the brakes, and I thought, oh, I better get the brakes checked. And then Ignacio, who is my angel, said, no, they're gone. You don't have any brakes. I said, that's silly. And I went around the corner on Queen Anne and pushed them, and again they felt a little mushy. And he said, that's it. That was the last. You have nothing. And I said, I talked back to him at this point in my life, it's raining. I have a haircut appointment. I am not going to pull over and take the goddamn bus. No. And he's like, you have no brakes. Don't you dare go down Davis. And I was like, I'm going to go. And if anything goes wrong, I'm going to use the handbrake. So stop it. And then I'm looking for the sign that says arterial turns. This is when you're on the top of Queen Anne and you're heading for Davis, if you know where I am. But there it is. It's right there on the side of the road. It says arterial turns. And so I'm like, is this where it turns? And it's like, yes, this is where it turns, yes. And so I turned, and it was this tiny little side street. And I was like, oh, dang it, went the wrong way. And I put on the brakes, and there was nothing. There was nothing. I had to roll slowly to a stop. I actually had to wait till the street went uphill a little bit to stop. Later, when I got it taken in, they said, this is a very old car, and your rubber tubes in your brake system broke, and all the fluid drained out, so you had nothing. And, you know, why did he do that? I have no idea. But it was that was December 23rd, and then on January 15th, I got a diagnosis of cancer. And all I can say is, he said, I'm with you. You're going to be okay. My sister had died of breast cancer. So getting breast cancer myself was scary. So here we come to the story of the orb. I went ahead and I was turning 18 years sober, and I had planned an 18-year sober party and sent out all the invites and, you know, planned everything. And then I got this news, and then I got that I was going to have a lumpectomy, not a mastectomy, and that it was probably a self-contained tumor. So I said, I'm going to just change my party to a get to keep my boob party. So I changed it on Facebook, you know, and I just said, you know, this is 18 years / get to keep my boob. So this picture was taken, everybody was singing happy birthday to me. And they had made a cake, and it said, happy 18 years and many more, Louisa. And people were singing, and my family came into my head. And my family said, you egotistical, narcissistic person, who would do this? Why do you need all this attention? And then here came Ignacio. And he kind of laughed, and he said, this is the whole point of life. Just let them love you. And I was like, and I turned it around and I did what he said. And this picture is different. I'm looking at the cake. You can see my son is looking at the cake with me, seeing what it says, and I'm actually genuinely smiling. This is my smile. And this is not as pretty a smile, but it's me genuinely laughing and feeling warm feelings. So I will say that. And I was 10 years cancer-free on the 29th of January. So I'm going to tell you my story, and will this work now?
Yeah.
Because my arm is shaking.
Yeah, so we're going to pull it like this one.
Okay, maybe I can kind of sit down. I don't know. I like standing up better.
Okay.
Well, I don't know.
We can just raise it.
Can't decide. starts like playing around with me, man. He just starts messing with me. I write down this woman's name before she says it at work. And she's like, what? I didn't say it yet. And I'm like, sorry. Cross it out. And he tells me I'm going to see this person. He brings someone very clearly to mind, and the next day they MySpace message me, someone from high school. And then this is a great one he did. This was a double whammy. Like, I don't know what the boxing term for this is, but feint and then punch, right? So I'm going along, and I know I'm going to see this friend of mine from AA that I haven't seen for years, Tim Smith. I'm going up Olive Avenue. And I'm like, Tim Smith is going to be walking down Olive Avenue. I haven't seen him for years. It's going to be one of those weird things. It's going to be great. And I see Tim Smith walking down the right side of Olive. And I'm like, yay, it happened. There he is. And I'm like, no, that's not him. Oh. And here comes my cynic, wanting that woo-woo thing down, right? And it says, see, this is how all of your same woo-woo things can be explained this easily. You could have just kept driving and thinking you saw Tim Smith, and it's all stuff you make up. And then here came Tim Smith down the left-hand side. And it was really him. And I Facebooked him later and said, were you coming down Olive Avenue at 1 o'clock this time? And he said, I was. And then he came to my first speaking thing here because he was so honored that he had been in one of my weird things. When my dad died, I went on a long journey into his experience of dying. When my father actually did pass, I could feel that he was very, very busy because he had let the alcoholism fool him day after day after day, and he was reckoning with that. He had thrown away God when he threw away the Catholic Church, which had been forced on him as a child, and he was reckoning with that. And I didn't feel that he was in purgatory, but I just felt like he was doing one heck of a life review, and I could feel it. He was so busy. One of my sponsees was killed in an accident. I've helped a lot of women in AA, and I loved this woman, and she was 26, and she stood up from a welding job, and her brains got dashed out because somebody was not spotting. Nobody was spotting for the crane. I had gone to see her 3 days before because somebody told me she was pissed at me and that I wasn't a good friend because I wouldn't come out and see her new house in SeaTac. So again, I had that feeling this is important, and I went to see her. And she put on her welding mask, and I got a dark feeling. And I felt that mask is scary, and I don't want to be in this room anymore with it. And she told me people had broken in, and I thought if they left bad energy, that's all it is. But she did not see the hook because she had on the welding mask. So that was why she died. And I was in an AA meeting where people can be kind of snarky sometimes in AA. She was very loud, she was very crazy, and a lot of people I felt judged her. And I stood up to speak about what an amazing woman she had been. And when I was getting my coat and stuff to leave, this woman came up to me and said, "You're going to think I'm insane, but I can see spirits and I want to tell you something." And I said, "Oh, okay, I don't think you're insane. What do you want to tell me?" She said, "You have a really powerful spirit, travels to your left. And when you were talking about Vanessa, it got 12 feet tall." Because I was loving, and he was with me. And I still didn't know he was a guy. I'm still rooting for it to be a woman. But as more and more weird things happened, I just began to sense that he was male. I very quickly tried to tell you the thing that brought me to IANDS, the mind reading thing, was pulling into Home Depot, the north one, and just thinking of some friends and how fond I am of them, and then seeing the wife naked. Saw the wife naked, hair down the front, she's on a bed, she's looking super sexy. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I go into Home Depot and I run into Joel. And I say, "Oh, I was just thinking about you and Wiley." I shouldn't say their names anyway. And he goes, "Yeah, we just sent the kids to Grandma's and we got a bed and breakfast, just us, and it was much needed." And I wanted to say, "Yeah, I know, who thought she was so sexy?" But it just blew my mind. And another thing is I wouldn't have run into him if I hadn't gone down the wrong aisle and gotten lost in the store for a little while. Like everything, the spider's belly, everything made that happen. I've had a ton of woo-woos. I have them all the time now. I mean, how many people here have known someone is going to call and then they call? Let's see hands. Yeah. Or you just know you're going to see someone and then you see them. Like, same thing. These happen a lot. I like to, at this last IANDS thing, I wanted to tell Kim that I needed to take a nap in her room because my roommate was doing something. And when I came and caught up with her, she said, "Why were you thinking so loud to me?" But that is stuff that happens. So I am also a through hiker. I believe that these bodies that we're given are absolutely amazing, amazing gifts. And it is really important to, you know, people who will like go bananas if there's a scratch on their car and they won't exercise. Like, I just don't get it, right? So I hike these long distance hikes, and in 2018 I hiked 125 miles alone. I hiked from Stevens Pass up to Washington Pass. It's the hardest part of the Pacific Crest Trail outside the Sierras, and my partner couldn't come with me, so I did it alone. When I got 60 miles in, I was coming down a steep hill, and Ignacio says to me, oh, by now I know he's a guy, he says, "This is where you fall. This is where you fall." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll be careful." He's like, "No!" He can swear, kind of. Like, it's not a swear word, but you can feel it. He's like, "I mean it. This is where you fall, and it's really, really bad." So I was quite tired and everything, so I just took these tiny little baby steps. I'm like, "Are you happy? Are you happy?" I'm taking tiny baby steps, and he doesn't say anything, so I guess he must be happy. And I climb over this rock and take a picture, and then I get this horrible spasm in my leg. And so that I like almost fall just standing there. If I had been cruising when that happened, I mean, it was a very steep glacial cirque. I would have gone and gone and gone. So then I think, okay, we're cool. I get to camp, it kind of keeps hurting. I'm praying that night and just telling him how grateful I am that I get to be out here. I was at a place called Mica Lake. If anybody's been to Mica Lake, it's incredibly remote and incredibly beautiful. And I made friends with these British guys who camped right next to me, and I just loved them. Like, I could see them as little towhead blonde brothers playing together. They left in the morning before I did. I left by myself, and I made it, I don't know, maybe like 3-4 switchbacks, and my knee started hurting so bad that it was like the dentist, but it was in my knee. And I had a beacon with me. But I've already, at that point, been doing NDE interviews for 1.5 years. I've been here. I've heard some crazy, crazy stuff. And so I just said, I'm not using that beacon. Something else is going to help me now. I'm 60 miles in. It's 60 miles further to get out, right? So I looked up and I saw this tree in front of me, and it looked like too big to be how high we were. I was at like 5,000 feet. Looked pretty big. I went over and I put my arms around it. I put my forehead on it, and I said, "Can you ask God to help me?" Because I really need help, and I just can't. I've prayed and it's not worked. And the tree said, "Every life must ask directly." And I heard it. I got it. And so then I get, "Yeah, but I'm really shy," and so blah, blah. Anyway, it just kept going like someone had hit a tuning fork, and that was the only thing it was going to say. Every life must ask directly. So I gave the tree a kiss. I turned around and I started to pray again, but this time I was empty. And I just said, "I know I'm here because of my ego, because I'm so eager to be a badass. Look at me, I can hike 125 miles alone. But you also know that I love this, and that I'm here because of love as much as because of ego. Can you give me some guidance?" And as soon as I thought the word guidance, all this information downloaded. He told me it wasn't my knee, it was my inner thigh, and it had pulled too tight, it was pulling things out of alignment. He showed me things from a physical therapist session that I've been to, the things that I needed to do better. And then the last thing, I had been hiking for a while, doing everything he was telling me to do, and I hadn't had pain yet. And he said, you know that little Velcro strip that you don't know why it's in your pack? Because I had thrown it out. He said, get it out now, put it on under your kneecap, and that is going to be my beacon, and I am going to heal you. And I'm like, I just want to get off the trail. I just want to get to help. And he's like, no, you're going to finish. And I did. I hiked, I hiked another 65 miles on that knee, and it has never bothered me again. So that was pretty cool. I was trying to get a past life regression thing, which I did have done, but that's another story. But I was trying to find somebody who'd do it remotely during the pandemic. I called this medium in California, and she says, no, I only do them person to person. I can't connect as well over. Who is that with you? I'm like, oh, I don't know. And she's like, oh my God, he's old. Oh my God, so masculine. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of was thinking that too. And she's like, no, he's old. And then she said, I think he's like Atlantis old. And that's where she lost me, because there's only so far woo-woo I can go. Anyway, so after that, I've got other things that have happened. I've talked to my dad and so on, but I was very, very upset about something. Cried, and Ignacio was with me, and he was comforting me. And you know those times when you've cried so much that then all of a sudden you're better. And I had him on the phone, and the tears were still all over my face, but I was smiling. And I said, I can't keep calling you Angel. I want to call you something. And he goes like, that's silly. He always thinks I am like a child. He sees me as a child. That's silly, little one. That's what he calls me. I'm like, please, I really just want something, anything. And he goes, I have had so many lives, and none of them are in alphabets you know. So this is what I'm talking about with it is not my thinking. That had never crossed my mind, right? And then I said, who cares, just give me something. I said, I'm going to go sit in my meditation chair, and I'm going to pay attention, and you show me something, okay? So I went down, I sat in the meditation chair, and he showed me letters above letters, and it took a while before I got Ignacio, but then he kept going, E. So I did Ignacio, and he's like, that'll do. And it's an Etruscan name, and it means born of fire. And that's where he was. He was in the fire. So he's like, you can call me that. So that's what I call him. He told me was when I came out of surgery, I just got my hip replaced in October. And I've been very stressed out. My mom, the whole thing with her being so old and in the retirement home, and I have to take all of her affairs over, and I have to deal with all my siblings. We all get along now, by the way. I will say those bridges have been mended. We just don't talk about anything that matters. It's amazing how well you can get along if you just never talk about anything that matters, right? So that's what we've been doing. But when I came out, he said, hey, I've got your attention now, because I've been so crazy that he hasn't been able to talk. So he showed me on the wall above the window to the nurse's station. He showed me at the center of this sun, and he said, all your connections are remote. You don't need to stay where you are. They're good. He's saying they're good. You don't need to stay. And then he showed me in my house, which is a little tiny urban house in Ballard, and he showed me going around, and I left a little pencil scribble, and he said, this is not good for you. And so I'm 64 in June, no, 63 in June. I'm always a year ahead of myself, so I won't be so freaked out when it happens. But when I turn 66, I am moving somewhere where I will have a lot of land and be in the country, and I'll miss everybody, but I'll come up still. Anyway, he told me to do that, and I'm doing it. And people are like, why are you going where you're going? And I'm like, it just sounds nice. Like, I can't tell people. My angel told me to go there, right? So it is a slow process of coming out, but that's where I'm going to leave it. So thank you, guys. get up here and just tell my story because I didn't really know what to make of it. But I'll tell you that I've been writing the newsletter since, can you still hear it?
Yeah.
Since September of 2017. And over that time I have heard the NDE stories from 31 NDEers. And it has changed. I understand. I had a very garden variety near-death experience. But it's very easy to just take one of those and say, it didn't happen. At least for me it was. So it was not that, but it was the after effects that changed me. I've learned from the people that I've interviewed that we are here on a mission. And we defined that mission when we were in spirit beforehand. This doesn't come from my own NDE, but it does come from these 31 people I've interviewed. We decide we're going to take on challenges, and we decide we're going to overcome them with love. So all the pains in our life, all of the rough things that we go through, we said, I can do this, and I can emerge with love. And that's what we're here to do. I had helped so many people in that room. They were mostly in AA, and then they were loving me back. And it is this exchange that we do of loving and supporting each other. So one near-death experiencer I interviewed, she was shown all the things that she had said she was going to do on her mission, and she hadn't done any. And during her NDE, she said, she was like, God, I can't believe I haven't done those, you know. And the thing is, when we come back, then we can't remember them, right? And another one was with God. This is Brian Murray, and he said, I'm going to go fix it. I can tell them, you know, like, I'll take up where Jesus left off. That's what he said. And God was like, it's not going to work like that. When you go back, you're not going to remember any of it. And my mother is 96, almost 97 years old, and she's a racist, classist, sexist, mean person. And she's 97. And I have like dear friends who have left the earth far too soon. But my mom, I keep saying that they keep giving her an extension. Like she's not learning the lesson. She's not learning the lesson that it's about love, so they keep giving her an extension. And then God also gives us free choice. A lot of people have described something kind of like a Plinko board with millions, choice after choice after choice that we make, but they're free choices, and that's how we shape our lives. And this one woman I interviewed is my favorite, Jodi Shinwar. She talked about how God was like, you need to go back, and she was like, no, not going back, I'm going over here. And then God would be with her again, and he'd be like, you really need to go back. And she was like, I'm not going, okay, I'm just not going. And she's talking to God, right? And then God took her to the ceiling of Kachina down by Lake Union and showed her brother hitting on this chick. And she said, that's my brother, he's hitting on that chick, she doesn't look good. And he's like, right, he needs you. And so she went back, and she ended up introducing her brother to the woman he married. So the free will, I was sent back against my will, but many people do get to choose. And I have no idea why I was sent back, but that brings me to my near-death experience. So I will start telling it. Tell me if I screw up with the mic again. So this was 1982. I was 22. I was living in Manhattan. I was very insecure. Been raised in a dysfunctional family, so I had become incredibly vain. That was just kind of how I felt self-esteem. And so I had finished at Vassar College, where I won all the prizes, and I moved to New York because that's where the nightclubs were, and I just wanted to be cool. Cool is kind of my new A+ in life, and I wanted to go to all the clubs. So I was in a nightclub in Greenwich Village called the Peppermint Lounge, and it was cool. And the basement was new wave, and it was cool. And my date, who was a coke dealer, we did all the cocaine he had brought, and I was feeling like I was just this close to feeling okay. And he ran out. And so we pulled together the money we had, and we bought what a guy told us was a gram of cocaine. And we snorted it, and my date said, this is doing nothing. It's doing nothing. And he just threw down his bill that he was using for a straw. And I said, well, I'll just do it all. Maybe if I do it all, I'll get a little bit high. So I just snorted everything there. And then, as I like to say, I screamed in his ear that I was going to go use the bathroom. Because that's what you do in nightclubs, right? So anyway, on my way to the bathroom, I began to get tunnel vision. And I wasn't scared because I was so used to drugs. I was just like, I'm holding on for the ride. I don't know what this is, but we'll see. I got in the bathroom, and when I was in the stall, I realized I could not read any of the graffiti. And I began to realize it was getting dark. This is not normal for cocaine. Cocaine makes you blah, 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 blah. You know everything. You'll feel fantastic. I couldn't read. I couldn't think. It was getting dark. And I began to realize I couldn't breathe because there was no air. After I got sober many years later, and I got a lot of friends who used to be drug dealers, they said in the 80s we used to cut cocaine with lidocaine, because if the customer puts the lidocaine on their lips, it numbs it and they think it's cocaine. And it sounds like you got sold pure lidocaine, and you got lidocaine poisoning. So lidocaine poisoning, it stops your heart. In fact, it stops all your autonomic nervous system. It just shuts it down. So I got out to my date and I said, there's no air, there's no air. And I was breathing as fast, hard as I could, but my heart was only going maybe like 30 beats a minute, 20 beats a minute, I don't know. But eventually they gave me a glass of water and they said, have this. He took me to the bartender, and the bartender gave me a glass of water, and I didn't want to have it, but I said, well, I'll just make them happy, because my last act was a people pleaser act. And I took a sip of water. So I will tell you what happened in this world was that I had a grand mal seizure, and I flung all around and did gross things that people do when they're having grand mal seizures. And then my heart stopped. I had a cardiac arrest. And the bartender came out from behind the bar and he did CPR on me. And it went on with wasn't doing anything because I was full of lidocaine for 3 minutes. And it shouldn't have done anything. I should not have come back. I was still full of lidocaine, right? But on my side, what happened for me was I first thought I'd hit my chin on the bar because it felt like a Popeye punch, and like I just shot up in the air. And I thought I was flying up in the air. And I went up above Manhattan, and I had a very slight thought of, oh, thank God, I'm leaving all that silliness behind. And what I meant by silliness was not just Manhattan and the nightclub. It was playing this role of being Louisa. I just didn't want to do that anymore. And I was free of being Louisa. So this means that my NDE was what's called amnesiatic. It's kind of hard to say, but it's not when you are like, is that noise? Oh, is that the radio? You're not like, I'm dead, I'm dead. I forgot all about that I was ever here, you know? And so I shot up in the air. It was a beautiful blue sky, and the ocean was going around me in all directions. And I got this idea that I could do a back bend and swan dive, and I did it, and it worked perfectly. And I was like, yes! I did this back bend, and then I was far, far above the ocean, and I had a thought. Isn't it like concrete when you come from this high? And then I had no fear. I just said, well, we'll find out. And I hit it with a perfect dive, and I dove way, way down. And that's cool. And then I thought, oh, look at the bubbles going up. How am I going to get back up there to the surface? Again, no fear. Next thing you know, I'm at the surface. And then I see a shore. And it's unfortunately not a tropical beach or a beautiful beach like that. It's more like a beach out at, not Mia Bay, but Point of Arches. It's more like that. It's got a bank, and there's this sea stack. And I'm at the shore, wading out of it, next thing I know, and I see on top of this mesa or sea stack, there is an old, old house. It's kind of blue, it's weather worn, it's got shingles, but they got those big spaces they get between them when the shingles kind of shrink. And I thought, that house has to do with me. I gotta get there. And so next thing I know, I'm at the foot of the mesa, but it's covered with this repulsive, gross, rotten, stinky stuff. And I gotta climb it to get there. But I had this sense of, I can do this. I can overcome this. And next thing I know, I had made it to the door frame of the house, but I was only this high, and I really had no more body. I had somehow left it with the slimy stuff. I'm just going to interrupt the narrative a little bit with sort of what I know now, which is that I was passing through different elements. I passed through air. I passed through water. I was on earth, and then here was wood, which is another element in Chinese. I saw the floor very, very close up, all the grain of the wood, super close up, and I kind of glided over it, just above it, and I knew this was the house of my ancestors. I knew this was where we all crossed through, that everybody before me had gone through that doorway, and everybody after me would. And I was so excited, so honored. And I could feel the presence of my ancestors, but I couldn't see them. And I felt in particular the one grandfather who had died before I was born. He was especially stoked that I was there and that he would get to meet me, be with me. But there was supposed to be an armchair, I knew, to look out at the ocean. And I knew that all my ancestors had loved to sit in this chair and look at the beautiful ocean. And I was like, what? This is no fair. Where's the chair? And I said, I want to see. As soon as I said, I want to see, I didn't really have a body, but it felt like I was getting pulled by the heart across that floor. And I said, whoa, I had a big like, what is happening? This is crazy. And it took me up, and then I went up the windowsill, and I'm like, what is happening? And I went over the windowsill, and I was flying over the ocean toward the sunset, over that dapple of gold that the sun leaves, and beautiful colors. And it just couldn't be better. I was going zoom. I was just so fast, and it just felt delicious, that speed. Then this is the one moment I had of recollecting my earthly life. I said, wait a minute, people cannot fly. Am I dreaming? Is this real? And a voice answered, this is the first time I ever heard Ignacio. He said, more real than anything back there. And I was not expecting to be answered. You know when you wonder? Like if you're like wondering something and somebody answers, it's not what you expect, right? So I was kind of like, whoa, but I was like, he's right, he's right. Although I didn't know he was a he then. I just knew it was a voice. I just knew it was a voice. So kind of hard to remember how little I knew about it then. And the sun grew bigger and bigger, and I had the thought, am I going to burn up when I hit it? And this is my last element, right? Fire is the only one I have left. And I got closer and closer, and then poof, I went through a sort of filament, and I was inside the sun. And in the sun was the light that we all try to describe and can't. That is absolute love that permeates every bit of your being. And I could feel it, and it was almost like it reminded me of lying on the beach and feeling the sun just warm you up so perfectly, but it was all throughout my consciousness, not my body. And it was love, and then I became aware of a figure that I couldn't see, because all I could see was light, but that was holding me like an infant and just pouring love into me, saying, you are so loved, you are so loved. And I loved the parent back again. I now believe that was Ignacio that was holding me. And I just wanted to hang out there for eternity. I was just, it could not have been more perfect. There was no sense of time. And all of a sudden, the voice says, quite clearly, you can't stay, you're not done. Boom, lights gone. Black, 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 gone. Darkness. And I felt just a little bit of falling. Before I even felt the falling, I said, no! as loud as I could. And I felt like, if you vaguely can remember being a toddler and deciding you're going to throw a fit to all fits, you know, to go beyond all fits and show those parents they can't make you do whatever it is. I had that feeling. And you show that parent, you can't make me go back. And then I got a little message, case is closed. And that's when I felt myself drop. And I was very afraid for just a fraction of a second. And then in the blackness, I began to see little stick figures doing all these antics and saying these little nursery rhymes. Like, how many hippos make a hopscotch? And I just thought, oh, this is not as good as the light, but it's kind of entertaining. And I felt like, oh, Saturday morning cartoons forever. I'll just watch this. It'll be okay. And so I watched, and then one of the figures' head filled in like a dinner plate and started getting too close, so I couldn't watch what the other stick figures were going on the swing sets and teeter-totters. I couldn't see them, so I really felt like, what are you doing? And then his rhyme was, how many fingers, what is your name? And then I realized I was back in the meat puppet. And I was absolutely devastated. I could not have been more bummed. I was like, you've got to be kidding. He thinks that he's a he and I'm a me, and he thinks we're separate. And he thinks we're going to burp these sounds back and forth to communicate, and I just can't do that anymore. I just can't do that anymore. And so he kept at it, and I remembered my tongue, and I always describe this, it sounds so weird when I say it, but it was like being in an apartment building upstairs, which was my brain. I was back in my brain. And there was this tongue that was down in the garage underneath the apartment building. And he wanted me to burp and move it. And so finally I went, Louisa, like there, see, I can still do it. Actually, I think I said 2 first, and then I said Louisa, because that's the fingers he had. And then I was back. But having been gone for that long, I've heard other near-death experiences say this. I had the mentality of a 5-year-old when I came back. I felt like a 5-year-old. So the way I was giddy and happy. So how could this have happened that the lidocaine was gone? I don't understand where it went, because I was fine. I had sweated like all around me. So my little party dress that I still have was soaked, and it was velvet, so it soaked up a lot, and there was water all around me. I thought they had thrown water on me, but it was all had poured out of all my pores when I returned. So I asked a doctor if the lidocaine could have been in that, and he said no. So I don't know. But I went up the stairs with him. All the people came with us. I didn't know what all the people were doing coming with us. I didn't understand why we were going upstairs. We went out and sat on the street where there were benches, and there was a whole line of taxi cabs, and I was just sitting there and I was smoking a cigarette, and the bartender who had saved my life came over. This is very shameful for me. But he said, you know, you were gone for 3 minutes and I didn't think you were going to come back. And I thought, ew, he's kind of bald and he had his mouth on my mouth. How embarrassing. That's what I thought. I'm sorry, but that's what I thought. I have tried so hard to find him since, but I haven't been able to. I think someday I will. Someday I will find him. And that's a separate story that I can tell another time, my search for him. But anyway, I eventually pieced together that we were waiting for an ambulance, and eventually pieced together that the ambulance was for me, and eventually thought my parents will find out and I will be in huge trouble and I will have to go to the hospital, and I hate hospitals, and I just was not having it. So I just said to my date, who had also been caught for some kind of cocaine thing at college and didn't want any more trouble. He was a middle school math teacher. Not a good thing, right? I said, I don't want to go in the ambulance. And so he just took my hand, we jumped in a cab, we drove away. All the people came and banged on the cab. I remember thinking that was so fun, because they were all banging on the cab. And I went back, and I was going to fast forward to the next morning, the next day. I was telling my roommate about my hallucination that I had had the night before. And when I got to the part in the light, she said, so that was kind of God. And I knew it was God. I knew it was this thing way, way underneath my personality. But personality just could not hack it. And so I said, yeah, it was like God, and went past it. And then I had time alone in the room, the bedroom, and I remember sitting with my back to the bed and looking at this very dusty little square table with I remember all the dust, and thinking that was not a hallucination. And then I was like, but if that was not a hallucination, then the church people are right, and you're going to have to start going to church and like wearing like dresses and not saying the F word all the time and not drinking and getting high and, you know, not being cool. And I was just like, I just can't. And so I'm like, there's got to be something else. What I used, you know, I hadn't heard of an NDE, hadn't heard of any of this stuff. No, couldn't say it was a DMT dump. I didn't know any of those things. Didn't even know really about hypoxia. But my image was of Hal in 2001, as Dave pulls out those tubes of liquid, whatever they are, and Hal gets more and more simplistic till he can only sing the song Daisy. And I thought my Daisy was love. So that, in other words, my brain had shut down and the last little spark to go out was love. But it had felt so big because that's all there was. And I said, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Nothing happened. It's over. It's done. Okay, I can go back to doing what I do. And I did. Only I got depressed. I mean, it's not really part of my story, but it wasn't fun anymore to do those things. And I kind of got darker and darker, and alcoholism slowly started to take me down. I married my college sweetheart, not the guy I had been on a date with, but I was soon unhappy with him and fell in love with this aerobics instructor, and where I was an aerobics instructor was my first lesbian relationship. Anyway, we were at Gloucester Beach in Massachusetts, okay? And it was morning. I woke up very early and I heard her bed squeaking with her boyfriend. And I was like, oh, I can't stand it, she's with her boyfriend. I was wrecking my marriage. I was drunk all the time. I was poisoning my body. I was doing all these things, and I got up and I walked on the beach alone in this horrible storm at like 7 a.m. and I saw a guy come over the dunes, and he had on a really cool, like legit Macintosh. He had a legit Macintosh hat, the pants, the whole thing. And I could just tell it was not nylon, it was rubber sprayed on fabric. And it was Madonna time. I was like into vintage clothing. So I made up my mind, I'm going to say, those are great. Where'd you find those? You know, because I loved shopping at vintage clothing stores. But as I got closer and closer, I saw this anguish on his face, absolute anguish. And he was looking out as if he could see the horizon. But there was no horizon there. And I'm going to speed up on the story. After I passed him and he hadn't spoken to me, I thought, what a jerk. And I turned around and there were no footprints. There were only mine. And what had happened is my anguish had tapped into this ghost's anguish. And we were on the same dark wavelength of woe is me and sadness. So I had seen him. And he didn't expect me to be able to see him. The next dark thing was that my mom told me that my brother, his wife was going to have a baby. And I knew the minute she said it that my brother was going to go into this horrible pit of darkness and sorrow and pain because the baby was going to die around the birth. And I didn't know how, but I knew that. And anytime my mom mentioned, oh, they bought a crib, I'd be like, who's going to take it down when the baby dies? And anything they mentioned, getting clothes, what are they going to do with those? The baby's going to be dead. And then when my brother went out with me the day before, we were at Happy Teriyaki, and I was absolutely miserable. And I just thought it was so ironic that it was Happy Teriyaki, and he was so happy, and he was going to plunge into this despair. But in my car, I had the sense it's your last chance to say something to him, and I didn't. And the next morning when he called me and told me his son had died, I felt like the weirdest person in the world. So I see that I'm kind of running out of time, so I'm going to pick it up a little bit and just tell about my evolving relationship with Ignacio. So, very accelerated form. I drank until I was suicidal. I was driving home one day at about 80 miles an hour and came to this narrowing in the road where there were railroad tracks, and I just said, I don't care if I die, and I drove through 80 miles an hour, got home, got out of the car, and just was congratulating myself on what a badass I was driving drunk. And then a voice hit me from above, and it said, this is the last time I can help you, and you do know right from wrong. And this experience was so strange, because you don't think, oh, that's my angel talking to me. What you think is, I was busy thinking this, and somebody just totally undercut that and said something completely different. And I did not want to believe in right and wrong, and here he's telling me you do know right from wrong. I didn't know it was a he. I just thought, am I schizophrenic? Am I Sybil? Is this like another personality happening? And then he did it again another time that I'm not going to go into. But I did get sober a month later, because it really messed up my drinking, because I did know right from wrong. And I had a sense that when he said, it's the last time I can help you, he was talking about that bridge. And he was meaning, if you really want to throw your life away, you can do it. I'm not going to stop you anymore. So after that, I have a long story that I'm going to kind of skip over. I've told it in a couple of other interviews about my sister's death, and about Ignacio telling me that I had to help her cross because she was dying of cancer. She was afraid. And he kept telling me, you've got to tell her about the light. And I kept saying, what is this voice, and why is this ridiculous? And then he has the power to show me things from the past, and he showed me her telling me that she could always hear even if she appeared to be out on morphine. And he showed me my other sister telling me that she had said dying at 41 of cancer is the biggest disc God can give you. And he took both of those and he said, she needs you to tell her. And so I went and I knelt by her bed and I spoke into her ear and I told her about the light. My brother was looking at me like I was nuts. I described the light, and she loved Jesus, so I said, Jesus will be with you. She died 20 minutes later. I panicked. I forgot all about the light. I forgot all about the voice, until I was really mad at the doctor for not doing anything. The doctor just said, we're going to let her die, right? And I was filled with rage, and then I felt her just take it all away. She had that ability. She took it all away, and she said, I am fine, I am wonderful. I felt her joy, and she filled me with the light, and I felt it again. And the hardest problem I had was keeping the joy off my face, because I was surrounded by people who were keening and crying and mourning. And my sister's body was right there, and I knew she was not there. So there were two saves after that when I was driving. One, I came to the exit of Mercer, and at Fairview, the light turned green, and a voice said, don't go. And so I looked behind me. There was no one behind me, so I didn't go. I just sat at the green light, and then I thought, how long don't go? And then a car came tearing down Fairview 100 miles an hour, right where I would have been. And this is the first time I spoke back. I said, thank you. I had never spoken to Ignacio before. Then he did it again with another thing. I guess I want to wrap up so there's plenty of time for questions. When should? Okay.
3:30, so you're good.
Okay, I'll keep going then. So I didn't know if that was my sister who said don't go. I was like, is that my sister who said don't go, or my sister who told me that this bus was going to come and careen past my car? The other one. But I knew it was not me, and I knew it was a voice. That was all I knew. So I began to think maybe I have this goddess, because by then I'm sober and I'm trying to pick a higher power for AA, and I really am still a lesbian, and I just hate the whole he God thing. I just hate it. So I'm like, I've got a mother goddess who looks after me, and that's who this is. So again, I'm going to accelerate the story. This is 2003, and so it's 20 years after my NDE. I'm still trying to be an atheist between these weird things happening. I'm still really like doing the AA thing, but my real thing is I just can't. You know, I'll say higher power, I'll say it's a doorknob, whatever, but I can't really do this. And I had a dream about a humongous spider, and I was so scared of spiders in the past. I can hold them in my hand now. But I was so scared of spiders, and in the dream I took this gigantic spider and I said to myself, I will find courage. And I knocked it into a glass, and it lay there on its back and showed me its belly, which had all these triangles of gray and beige and darker grays, and they were in this intricate pattern, and the message came, diamonds of infinite precision. And I thought, wow, even on a spider's belly. Then I woke up. Then I told my partner, who I did not know was beginning an affair with me. I mean, with someone else, not with me. Anyway, I told her all about the dream. She's like, yeah, she's busy thinking about the woman she's infatuated with. And I get my son together. So we had a son, and he was 2.5, and he had to go to toddler whatever. And I had the toddler notebook, whatever you call that, not toddler, preschool. I can't think of what it's called. But anyway, I was late. And I finally got the diaper bag. I was a terrible, disorganized mom. I finally got him on my hip. I grabbed my keys, and I see right above where I sit at the computer, there's this black ping pong ball on the ceiling. I'm like, what the hell is that? And I go closer and closer, and it's the biggest spider I've ever seen in my life. Legs are all drawn in. So I think, I can be courageous. And I thought, wait, I just said that in the dream. Right? And this is weird. Well, okay, so I got a chair, got him. He's got a big clunk, right? Cover the jar, the glass. I ran to the neighbors because I didn't want that spider in my yard. I feel bad about that. And I dumped it on a plant, which is the same plant it had been on in the dream. It was a juniper type thing. And it just fell on its back. And it showed me its belly. And what do you think was there? Diamonds of infinite precision, the exact same pattern, but this time it came with another message. God is in every detail, right down to the pattern on a spider's belly. And I got it, but I was freaking out, and I thought, I actually thought, is this This Is Your Life, where they've hidden cameras, but they put something in my brain? Like, I couldn't, the metaphor I like to use is if you got on mittens and you're trying to get your keys out of some straw. Like, that's what it was like for me, trying to think so hard. How could this have happened? How can I explain this in a materialist framework? And I couldn't. So I was mystified. I went in and, got my son and did the thing I had to do. And then, have you ever found yourself driving somewhere that you're like, why am I going here? Because it's important. So I drove to see this friend that I hadn't seen in years and years. She was in AA, and she was a cancer survivor. I had not yet gotten cancer. And it was her 40th birthday, and I was the only person with a kid, and it was really, really hard. And he's like getting into